A city of gold that lured empires into the green void. Welcome to the deep dive, where we tear apart the sources so you don't have to.
For 500 years, maps shifted, armies marched, and fortunes vanished, all chasing the ghost of El Dorado.
That's right. We're tackling the myth, the maps, and, well, the often catastrophic historical reality behind the ultimate quest. We've gathered the key sources that track this whole thing, right from a single ritual all the way to its modern legacy.
Yeah, and our mission for you today is pretty crucial.
Oh,
We
yeah.
really need to peel back that European fantasy,
Yeah.
the literal Golden City idea, and uncover the real, complex indigenous worlds they tragically missed in their obsession.
Okay, let's get into it, starting right at the source. When you hear El Dorado now, you probably picture like a glittering city buried in the jungle.
Mm,
But it didn't start like that at all. The phrase originally meant the Gilded One or the
Right.
Golden Man.
exactly. It wasn't a place, it was a person. Specifically, the leader of the Muisca people. This is in the northern Andes, modern Colombia. The sources detail this incredible coronation ceremony at Lake Guadavita. It's this remote, high-altitude lake.
And the ritual itself, I mean, it sounds absolutely spectacular. The incoming ruler, he prepares with 6 years of really harsh abstinence, hidden away in a cave.
Right.
Then coronation day comes. His body's covered in some sticky resin and then just sprayed head to toe with fine gold dust. He literally becomes the Golden Man.
He does. Then he gets on a reed raft, sails to the middle of the lake with his chiefs, the caciques, and they throw offerings, gold objects, emeralds into the water. It's all about dedicating them to the gods for a good rain.
Okay, so here's the key thing then. The Muisca used gold mainly for this kind of spiritual ritual purpose.
Precisely. It wasn't about material wealth in the European sense. It had immense spiritual value, but it wasn't currency like gold was in Spain.
So the Spanish just fundamentally misunderstood what they were even hearing about. They heard gold, thought riches, and missed the entire point. Is that the core misunderstanding that kicks off this whole 500-year chase?
It absolutely is. That sacred ritual, it mutates almost immediately in the European mind. They hear any tales involving gold, and the story just balloons. The gilded ruler becomes a fictional golden city or a kingdom, even a whole empire. Sometimes they call them Manoa, sometimes Omagua.
Right, and then the map makers get involved, which makes it all seem so much more real. You get these stories, like Juan Martinez de Albujar claiming he'd actually visited a golden city called Manoa, right next to a huge lake.
Exactly. And that convinces cartographers to slap this phantom Lake Parim onto the maps, often down near the Guiana Shield area. Suddenly, rumor looks like geography if it's on the map.
It must be real, and the hunt begins in earnest.
Yeah, you see this huge convergence in the 1530s. Early Spanish conquistadors, Quesada, Fetterman, Belalcázar, they're all racing through the Andes.
And they do find some gold, right? Enough to confirm there are riches in the Americas.
Exactly. Enough to fuel the belief that the ultimate source, the big one, must be out there somewhere. Quesada, in fact, specifically finds Lake Guadavita in 1537, the site of the original ritual.
But finding the lake wasn't enough. The search for the city, for Manoa, drives them deeper, and often into total disaster. Like Gonzalo Pizarro's expedition east of Quito in 1541, that one was just catastrophic.
It was. And it's that expedition, ironically, that leads Francisco de Orellana to drift the entire length of the Amazon River in 41 and 42.
And Orellana's crew, they come back with these incredible stories, don't they, of encountering really dense populous civilizations along the river.
They do. His chroniclers write about huge settlements. Modern estimates suggest maybe 5 to 8 million people living along the Amazon around 1500.
Wait, 5 to 8 million? That's staggering.
It is. And it's a crucial insight because, think about it, later explorers found, well, what they described as wilderness.
So the landscape Orellana saw was almost entirely gone just a few decades later.
Disease, what historians call virgin soil epidemics. Smallpox, measles diseases, the indigenous populations had no immunity to, brought unintentionally by the first Europeans.
Wow.
The death toll was immense. It caused this massive demographic collapse that effectively erased the human geography, as one source puts it.
So later explorers weren't hacking through untouched jungle half the time. They were unknowingly walking through the ruins and graveyards of recently destroyed societies.
Pretty much, yeah. And because those societies were gone, the idea of finding a hidden city seemed maybe more plausible. later on. It's a really tragic paradox.
And this failure by the Spanish to find the Golden City, it doesn't stop the search. It just draws in rivals.
Exactly. The English couldn't resist getting involved. Which brings us to Sir Walter Raleigh.
Ah, Raleigh, and his obsession with the Orinoco River. So 1595, he makes his first big move, captures a Spanish settlement in Trinidad, grabs the governor, Antonio de Barrio.
And grills him about Manoa. Then Raleigh sails about 400 miles up the Orinoco. Finds nothing, of course.
But he goes back to London and writes this incredibly persuasive account, exaggerating everything, claiming vast riches were just around the corner, basically trying to get back in Queen Elizabeth's good graces.
He was a brilliant salesman for the myth, even if he came back empty-handed. Maybe because he came back empty-handed?
But the obsession turns really deadly on his return trip, doesn't it? 20 years later, 1617, King James I lets him out of the Tower of London.
Right, with a very specific mission. Find a particular gold mine near the Spanish town of San Tome. And critically, James gives him explicit orders. Do not fight the Spanish. There was a peace treaty.
And Raleigh just ignores it, or couldn't control his men.
Well, disaster struck. His men attacked San Tome. Raleigh's own son, Wat, was killed in the fighting.
Oh, terrible.
Then his loyal captain, Lawrence Keymis, couldn't find the promised mine. Raleigh apparently tore into him, just berated him relentlessly. Keymis went back to his cabin and committed suicide. Shot himself, and when that didn't kill him instantly, he stabbed himself. It's just utter despair and failure.
And Raleigh himself, he sails back to England.
And gets executed in 1618. And here's the kicker. It wasn't for failing to find gold. It was for disobeying orders and attacking the Spanish, violating the peace treaty.
Wow, he died for breaking the rules, not for failing the quest. That's such a bureaucratic end to this grand mythical obsession.
It really underscores how intertwined the myth was with actual state policy and geopolitics. But even Raleigh's execution didn't kill the legend.
No, it persisted. Okay, let's do that map moment. Imagine we're flying out from the Muisca Lakes near Bogota, way over east, across Venezuela, towards the Guiana Highlands, the border with Guyana and Brazil. That's where Lake Parim and Manoa kept appearing on maps for centuries.
Right. And that location, the Guiana Shield area near the Orinoco headwaters, it likely relates to seasonal floodplains. Vast areas that flood during the rainy season could look like a huge lake from a distance. A sort of mirage that explorers might have misinterpreted, especially if they wanted to see a lake connected to a golden city.
So wishful thinking plus maybe some confusing geography kept the myth alive on paper.
For a very long time. Meanwhile, people were still trying back at the origin point in Colombia. You had these ambitious projects trying to drain Lake Guatavita. Antonio de Sepulveda in the 1580s, even an English company as late as 1909.
And did they find anything?
They found artifacts, definitely. Things like the famous Muisca raft votive figure, although that specific piece was found elsewhere. In Pasca, it represents the kind of gold offerings made. But they didn't find a city's worth of gold. They couldn't drain it completely. And what they found confirmed the ritual use.
And it also confirmed that the Muisca's real day-to-day wealth, their economic engine, was stuff like salt, emeralds, coal, things they traded widely.
Exactly. Gold was sacred, not commercial for them.
So with Colombia not panning out for a literal city, the search kind of spreads out. Geographically, the legend gets blended with other stories.
It does. It gets conflated with related but distinct Andean legends. Particularly Paititi, this idea of a lost refuge city of the Incas, hidden somewhere deep in the Amazonian foothills after the Spanish conquest.
Ah, right. Because the Spanish had found immense Inca gold when they conquered Peru. They sacked the Coricancha, the Temple of the Sun in Cusco, which was clad in gold.
Precisely. So the memory of that real plunder fueled the idea that maybe the Incas had managed to hide even more treasure away in some secret jungle city, maybe reached by hidden tunnels, the Sacabones.
It's like the legend just kept moving, always just beyond the next range of mountains, the next bend in the river.
Always receding. But the myth check across all these variations, across all the sources, remains the same. There's just no credible archaeological or textual evidence from any indigenous source for a literal city paved with gold the way the Europeans imagined it.
That image, streets of gold, golden buildings, that was purely a European projection of their own desires onto the landscape.
Absolutely. It reflects European values and fantasies, not indigenous reality.
Okay, so the Golden City itself, as imagined, was a myth, a projection, but the explorers, obsessed with that, missed something real, didn't they? You mentioned earlier these vast populations Oriana saw. What did they miss?
They missed the actual complex societies that were there. And this is where modern science comes in, flipping the script. We've gone from conquistadors with swords to archaeologists with lidar.
LIDAR, that's the remote sensing tech that can basically see through the jungle canopy, right?
Exactly. Projects using lidar, like in Colombia's Sierra Nevada or across parts of the Amazon, they're revealing these vast, engineered landscapes that were totally invisible to the naked eye, hidden under centuries of jungle growth.
What kind of things are they finding?
Huge networks of causeways, canals, agricultural terraces, urban settlements, geoglyphs. In Colombia, for example, the Tairona civilization built sophisticated cities with stone foundations, plazas, and incredible water management systems.
Water management. Why was that so important?
Well, in some of these areas, you get incredibly high rainfall, maybe up to 4 meters a year. Their engineering, things like drainage and terracing, helped prevent erosion and allowed these structures to survive for hundreds of years, even after they were abandoned around 1600, likely due to those epidemics.
So the real lost cities weren't made of gold. They were these complex, engineered, urban and agricultural systems built by sophisticated societies.
That's the true wonder, the evidence of widespread, complex indigenous engineering and urbanism that existed before the Europeans arrived. Worlds that collapsed due to disease and conflict and were then swallowed by the jungle. That's the treasure science is uncovering.
Which leads us to a really interesting world historical twist you mentioned earlier. El Dorado, the gold, was the dream, but it wasn't gold that actually reshaped the world, was it?
No, ironically, it was silver. The sheer volume of silver pouring out of mines like Potosi in Bolivia and Zacatecas in Mexico that became the real engine of the Spanish Empire and arguably early global trade.
Silver funded the Spanish armies, their empire.
It became the backbone of the whole colonial system. It paid for everything. It connected continents. Think of the Spanish silver dollar becoming a de facto global currency, traded all the way to China via the Manila galleons.
But this flood of silver, like the gold obsession, had a dark side for Spain itself, didn't it? You mentioned the Dutch disease.
Yes, so much silver flooded into Spain that it caused massive inflation. Prices soared. And because Spain could just buy whatever it needed with American silver, its own domestic industries like textiles, wool collapsed. It became cheaper to import than to produce.
So the treasure actually undermined their own economy in the long run, a resource curse.
Pretty much textbook. Short-term, boom, long-term stagnation. And there's an even darker human cost we need to acknowledge.
Slavery.
Absolutely. The relentless demand for labor to mine this gold and silver, especially as indigenous populations collapsed from disease and exploitation, directly fueled the transatlantic slave trade. It was one of the largest forced migrations in human history.
And you see specific links in places like Colombia.
Very clearly. In colonial New Granada, which is now Colombia, as indigenous miners died or resisted, they were rapidly replaced by enslaved Africans brought specifically to work the gold mines. The data is chilling. The historical presence of colonial gold mines is strongly correlated with the prevalence of slavery later on in the 19th century.
And that legacy continues even today.
Statistically, yes. Modern Colombian municipalities that had those historical gold mines and associated slavery tend to show enduring negative development outcomes, higher poverty rates, lower access to things like clean water, lower vaccination rates. The ghost of that pursuit for gold and the systems built around it is still tangible.
It's incredible and tragic how long that shadow is. And yet the myth of El Dorado, the pure fantasy, it just keeps going, doesn't it, in pop culture?
Oh, absolutely. It's an incredibly durable story template. Think of films like Aguirre, The Wrath of God, or even animated movies like The Road to El Dorado, or adventure stories like Dora and the Lost City of Gold or The Lost City of Z.
It's always the same elements, isn't it? The map, the jungle, the promise of unimaginable wealth, the danger, the betrayal.
Exactly. It's the perfect narrative loop. Promise, peril, the hope that this time the map is right, the treasure is real. It taps into something fundamental about human desire and the lure of the unknown.
So looking back at these centuries of searching, what did the explorers, maybe accidentally, teach us?
Well, they showed us how easily rumor and desire can become state policy, especially when empires are hungry for resources and miracles. Raleigh's execution is the ultimate example, failed to deliver the impossible and pay the price for the geopolitical fallout.
And they also paved the way, unintentionally, for modern science to step in.
In a way, yes. The failures of the old methods, just marching and digging based on rumor, highlighted the need for more systematic approaches. Now, field science, archaeology, anthropology, remote sensing like LIDAR is slowly replacing the legend of easy gold with real, hard-won knowledge about these lost populations and their vast, complex networks.
So the real treasure wasn't gold, but knowledge.
El Dorado wasn't a place you can pin on a map. It was really a mirror, reflecting human desire, greed, and imperial ambition.
Chasing it remade maps and markets, wrecked lives and economies, but the real gold, maybe, was the understanding of the worlds that were there all along, the ones we're only now beginning to truly appreciate. Now, here's a final provocative thought for you to chew on, something that really puts the whole chase into perspective. Even at its absolute peak, the flood of American treasure, mostly silver, remember that funded Spain's global ambitions, only averaged about 2.7% of Spain's total GDP in the 16th century.
Wow, that's small.
Relatively, yes, which suggests the real curse wasn't just inflation, but that this external cash injection, while significant, was just enough to let the Spanish crown avoid the hard work of building an efficient, broad-based tax system at home. They relied on the silver windfall instead of modernizing their own state finances, which ultimately contributed to their long-term decline centuries later. They were weakened by the very wealth they sought.
A fascinating and cautionary final thought. This is Curious Minds. Until next time, stay curious.